Douluo, Martial Soul Asura Sword, Supreme Killing God Chapter 111. Hypocritical Yu Xiaogang manipulating Flender. Xiaogang, are you okay? Flender stood to the side, letting out a long sigh as he looked at Yu Xiaogang with a complex expression. Although he had already begun to harbor a faint suspicion regarding Yu Xiaogang's previous bitter complaints, he was after all not the kind of person who would easily abandon a brother. If Yu Xiaogang really was as wretched as the rumors made him out to be, then he would just accept it. I'm fine. Yu Xiaogang's eyes were bloodshot, his chest heaving violently. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Boss Fu, you saw what just happened with your own eyes, didn't you? I told you that those people from Spirit Hall are ruthless, malicious, and act with absolutely no bottom line. They actually forced me to absorb a 10-year spirit ring without even giving me a choice. This point Yu Xiaogang suddenly clenched his fists tightly. Just now, if I had dared to shake my head in refusal, that venomous Wuhan Hall holy maiden would have definitely killed us on the spot. He snorted coldly. If it were just me today, I would rather die than submit. I may be called a piece of trash, but I still have my pride. At worst, it's just death, and I'll be another brave man in 18 years, he sighed. But you are here today, and you are my good brother. We haven't known each other long, but I have already come to regard you as the person I trust most in this life, so even if I have to endure endless humiliation, I cannot drag you down with me. He finished speaking. Yu Xiaogang could no longer control himself. Two streams of hot tears welled up in his eyes and slid silently down his cheeks. Flender stared blankly at Yu Xiaogang, feeling as if his heart had been violently gripped by something. For a spirit master, the importance of a spirit ring goes without saying. It is something that accompanies them for a lifetime. Forcing a spirit master to absorb a 10-year spirit ring is an insult no different from the hatred of having one's wife stolen or father murdered. To think that Xiaogang was such a loyal and affectionate person, willing to endure such a humiliating disgrace just to protect him. At this thought, Flender felt his face burning with an unbearable sense of shame. He cursed himself fiercely in his heart. Flender, oh Flender, you really deserve to die. How could you doubt your own good brother? The more he thought about it, the more guilty he felt. His eyes grew red and a sour feeling welled up in his nose. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Yu Xiaogang's shoulders. Xiaogang, since you call me Boss Fu, then I, Flender, will put my foot down today. From now on, I will never let anyone bully you again. If anyone dares to lay a finger on you, I, Flender, will be the first to fight them to the death. Boss Fu, Yu Xiaogang choked out. With those words of yours, all the grievances I suffered today were worth it. Don't say that, Flender patted his shoulder. You are my brother and your business is my business. So what if it's Spirit Hall? Just like you said, at worst it's just death. No, don't be like that. Yu Xiaogang hurriedly shook his head, an anxious and moved expression appearing on his face. I know in my heart how well you treat me, but you absolutely must not go head-to-head with a powerful force like Spirit Hall for my sake. Although Spirit Hall appears upright and honorable on the surface, they are incredibly dark behind the scenes. If you offend them, your end will likely be miserable. It's just not worth it for someone like me. Whether it's worth it is for me to decide. Flender stiffened his neck, looking stubbornly unyielding. You are my good brother, don't say such things ever again. Fu, for me, Yu Xiaogang, to meet a good brother like you in this lifetime must be a blessing from my past life. Flender grinned. Don't worry, as brothers united, there is no hurdle we cannot cross. In the future, whatever happens, we will face it together. All right, Yu Xiaogang nodded heavily. By the way, Boss Fu, this is no place to linger. Let's leave. If those two double back, we'll be in danger. You're right, Flender grew alert. Let's leave the Stardew Great Forest first. The two immediately turned and walked toward the outer perimeter of the forest. Flender walked ahead to clear the path, vigilantly observing the surroundings. Yu Xiaogang followed behind him at a leisurely pace. He looked at Flender's back, a myriad of thoughts churning in his mind. A 10-year spirit ring was indeed a stain he could never wash away, but it was not entirely useless. At least today, by using this spirit ring to put on a show of enduring humiliation for the greater good, he had completely bound Flender to him. He understood people like Flender too well. Loyal and affectionate types were most susceptible to genuine displays of emotion. If you tried to reason with him, he might not listen. But if you appealed to his sense of brotherhood, he would likely risk his life for you. Such a person was the easiest to manipulate. Yu Xiaogang believed that with his peerless wisdom, Flender would be led by the nose by him for the rest of his life. Moreover, Flender's talent was decent, and he would surely become a powerful figure in the future. This would be a powerful connection in Yu Xiaogang's hands, a chess piece for his future revenge against Spirit Hall. Not only that, once he successfully proved himself in the future, he could use this spirit ring to embellish the events of today, making them sound sufficiently tragic. For instance, a genius theoretical researcher who willingly endured humiliation to save his brother, forced by the evil Spirit Hall to absorb a 10-year spirit ring. When that time came, everyone would sympathize with his plight and admire his loyalty. At this thought, Yu Xiaogang's mood brightened again and his footsteps grew a bit lighter. Did Spirit Hall think this could destroy him? What wishful thinking. At sunset behind the Supreme Pontiff Palace in Spirit City, Qian Xunji's residence, under the flower vines in the corner of the courtyard wall stood a swing. Sitting on the swing was a small figure. It was none other than Qian Rengsu. She wore a pale yellow dress, her two short little legs dangling in midair. As the swing swayed back and forth, she let out bell-like laughter from time to time. Now 2 years old, she was as exquisite as a carved jade doll, her skin as fair and tender as a peeled egg, her large eyes blinking brightly. Anyone who saw her would know that this girl was destined to be a peerless beauty in the future. Behind the swing stood a woman who was gently pushing it with tender, rhythmic movements. The woman was none other than Ling Yuan. Ever since she had Qian Rengsu, Ling Yuan no longer concerned herself with the affairs of Spirit Hall, devoting all her mind to her daughter. Having been a mother for 2 years, the sharpness of a titled Douluo about her had faded significantly, replaced instead by a touch of gentleness in her features. Mama higher, Qian Rengsu cried out in a soft, sweet voice, her tiny hands tightly gripping the swing's ropes as she tilted her little head up. Make sure you hold on tight, replied with a smile, applying a bit of force with her hands to push the swing forward. As the swing soared, Qian Rengsu laughed even more joyfully, her laughter echoing throughout the courtyard. After playing for a long time, the swing gradually came to a halt. Ling Yuan bent down and scooped Qian Rengsu into her arms with gentle, practiced movements. Chapter 112, Qian Rengsu's Happy Childhood Spirit Core. Mommy, when will Daddy be back? Qian Rengsu wrapped her arms around Ling Yuan's neck, tilted her head, and asked, her large eyes blinking. Ling Yuan smiled, raised her hand to smooth out the golden hair that had been ruffled by the wind, and said, he should be back soon. Then will Daddy bring me something delicious? Qian Rengsu blinked, her face full of anticipation. Ling Yuan tapped her gently on the forehead. You only ever think about food. As the mother and daughter were chatting and laughing, a slender figure walked into the courtyard. It was Qian Xunji. His pace was composed and a faint smile played on his face. Yay, Daddy is back! Qian Rengsu's eyes lit up immediately. She began to squirm in Ling Yuan's arms, her little arms and legs flailing wildly. Mommy, put me down quickly! Ling Yuan smiled and set her on the ground. As soon as she was released, Qian Rengsu ran out, her short little legs moving fast, her small dress fluttering slightly in the wind. Qian Xunji took 2 quick steps, crouched down and opened his arms. Qian Rengsu dove into his arms, burying her small head against his chest and rubbing against it. The next moment he lifted Qian Rengsu up high. Little Zhu, did you miss Daddy? Qian Xunji's voice was very low and gentle, his eyes full of doting affection. At this moment he had none of the dignity of the Supreme Pontiff, he was just like an ordinary father. Missed you, Qian Rengsu answered crisply and clearly. Immediately after, she changed the subject. Daddy, did you bring me anything delicious? Qian Xunji looked at her eager expression and couldn't help but laugh, of course. He freed one hand and took out a beautifully packaged pastry from his spirit tool. After unwrapping it, he held it to Qian Rengsu's mouth. Come, little Zhu, have a taste. Qian Rengsu held the pastry with both small hands, lowered her head and took a bite, getting a few crumbs on the corner of her mouth. Wow, this is delicious. Her eyes lit up instantly and she mumbled indistinctly. Then she held the pastry toward Qian Xunji's mouth, her small face full of seriousness. Daddy, you eat some too. Qian Xunji lowered his head, took a small bite and nodded with a smile. It really is delicious. Qian Rengsu turned her head again, holding up the half-eaten pastry and waving it toward Ling Yuan. Mommy, you eat some too. Ling Yuan walked over, took a small bite and said with a smile, all right, we're having dinner soon, so eat a little less. It's so delicious. Qian Rengsu pouted, her tone carrying a hint of grievance, and she took another bite. Ling Yuan smiled helplessly and reached out to wipe the crumbs from the corner of her mouth, her movements gentle and doting. As the family of 3 was enjoying this heartwarming moment, 2 figures appeared at the courtyard gate. It was Su Mo and Bibi Dong. They had just arrived at Spirit Hall and their purpose for coming here was simple. First, to report that they were safe, and second because Sumo had been in seclusion for a long time and hadn't seen Qian Rengsu in a while, so they stopped by to check on her. Yay, it's Brother Sumo. Qian Rengsu became excited immediately, struggling desperately in Qian Xunji's arms. Daddy, put me down quickly. Seeing this, Qian Xunji felt a bit sour in his heart but set Qian Rengsu down. Qian Rengsu scampered over to Sumo, hugged his thigh and looked up with her small face. Brother Sumo, you haven't come to see little Zhu in so long. Little Zhu missed you so much. Sumo crouched down and reached out to pat her head. Brother missed you too, and now I'm here to see you, aren't I? Bibi Dong stood to the side with her hands on her hips, deliberately putting on a stern face. Little Zhu, don't you miss sister? Qian Rengsu quickly let go of Sumo and turned to hug Bibi Dong's long legs. I did. Bibi Dong couldn't help but laugh, reaching out to pinch her small cheek. That's more like it. At this moment, Qian Xunji and Ling Yuan walked over. Was the trip smooth? Qian Xunji asked. Quite smooth, Sumo nodded. All right, Ling Yuan greeted with a smile. Don't just stand there, let's go inside first. Dong or Zai Omo have dinner here tonight. Sumo nodded with a smile. All right, then I'll have to trouble you, teacher and mistress. The group chatted and laughed as they prepared to head into the house. However, Qian Rengsu refused to let anyone else carry her. She insisted on being held by Sumo. This made Bibi Dong feel a bit jealous. She often came to play with Qian Rengsu, while Sumo had only visited a few times. and she didn't know why Qian Rengsu was so clingy to Su-mo at the dinner table. Qian Rengsu was like a happy little fruit, making everyone very happy. After dinner, Su-mo and Bibi Dong rose to leave. Qian Rengsu reluctantly tugged at the corner of Sumo's clothes. "Brother Sumo, will you come again tomorrow?" Sumo patted her head. "I will." Sumo and Bibi Dong left the place, walking under the moonlight toward the Holy Sun's palace. The next day in the cultivation room, Sumo sat cross-legged. He was only one step away from the level 90 bottleneck, but he wasn't in a hurry to break through at this moment. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Should I condense a spirit core? Sumo suddenly thought of the spirit cores from later generations. Although for him who was about to become a god, the effect of a spirit core wasn't very significant, but at the very least it could still bring tangible benefits at the current stage. Because his spirit rings were almost all top-tier high-age spirit rings, although the damage was high, the spirit power consumed when using a spirit ability was also extremely terrifying. If he had a spirit core, his sustainability would be greatly improved. Moreover, even if the spirit core wasn't very useful to him, the titled Douluo of Spirit Hall and people like Bibi Dong around him could also condense spirit cores in the future to increase their combat power. If successful, it would be a qualitative leap for the strength of the entire spirit hall. But the problem was, current spirit masters had no concept of this at all. Sumo only knew a general idea. He remembered that a spirit core seemed to be formed by compressing liquid spirit power into a solid state and storing it within the danshin. But it was easy to say and extremely dangerous to do. A slight carelessness could lead to the risk of it spiraling out of control and exploding. Therefore, Sumo didn't dare to act rashly. If an accident happened, the loss would outweigh the gain. But soon Sumo thought of the current vicious beasts such as Dai Tian and the Snow Empress. They seem to have spirit cores. However, going to the Lake of Life with his current strength would be suicide. Although he had the Asura god behind him, what if something went wrong? After all, there were too many vicious beasts there, and there was also a silver dragon king with divine rank strength. Sumo frowned slightly. To be safe, I'd better wait until I reach level 90 and take a trip to the far north. Sumo made up his mind immediately. Although the Snow Empress's strength was also terrifying, with Sumo's current strength, it wasn't impossible for him to fight her. He had divine force in his body. Although the quantity wasn't large, it was the divine force of the Asura god and its quality was extremely high. If he fused the divine force into his spirit ability, the power of the spirit ability would definitely rise to another level. Having set a goal, Sumo no longer hesitated. He immediately closed his eyes and entered a state of cultivation. Chapter 113, Level 90, Leaving Spirit City. 1 month later, inside the cultivation room of the Holy Sun's palace, Sumo was sitting cross-legged. Suddenly the aura around him surged sharply. He had reached a breakthrough to level 90. Although he had been just one step away previously, for every spirit master, the final level to cross a realm was precisely the most difficult. For instance, someone stuck at level 29 unable to make progress. If not for an immortal herb, they could exhaust their entire life and never cross that threshold. Therefore, for Sumo to complete this breakthrough within 1 month was already extremely fast. When Sumo walked out of the cultivation room, the 3 women including Bibi Dong were in the room practicing cultivation. It couldn't be helped. The pressure Sumo placed on them was simply too great, and they all wanted to catch up to Sumo's pace as quickly as possible. Sumo did not disturb the 3 women's cultivation, but instead went straight to the Supreme Pontiff Palace. He was preparing to leave Spirit City. Not only did he need to head to the far north, but he also had to complete his god's trial. The journey was long and he did not know how long it would take, so he naturally had to bid farewell to those around him one by one. Inside the Supreme Pontiff Palace, Qian Xunji was handling official duties. Standing below him were 2 palace guardian Douluo. They were Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo. Chrysanthemum Douluo had returned to Spirit City not long ago. Over these years, Spirit Hall had secretly trained quite a few spirit masters responsible for managing the ice and fire yin-yang well, while the duty of guarding it was rotated among the elders. Furthermore, Yu Guan and Gui Mei could only unleash their maximum potential when together, so he had been transferred back. Seeing Sumo enter, Qian Xunji looked at him with a smile. "Xiaomo." Sumo performed a salute first, then said, "Teacher, I have reached a breakthrough to level 90 and am preparing to leave Spirit City for a while. Firstly, to obtain a spirit ring and secondly, to complete my god's trial along the way." Upon hearing that Sumo had reached a breakthrough to level 90, Qian Xunji was first delighted, but then a look of worry appeared in his eyes. "Xiaomo, how about I send an elder to accompany you? Thank you for your kindness, teacher, but this disciple does not need it." Qian Xunji pondered for a moment, then finally nodded. Very well then. He knew that Sumo's current strength was unfathomable. Even as a titled Douluo himself, he was far from being a match for Sumo. "You must be very careful on this trip. If you need any help, be sure to send word back to Spirit Hall." Qian Xunji urged him once more. "Understood, teacher." Ahead, say goodbye to Zuer. "Once you leave, that girl will surely be sad." Qian Xunji waved his hand, his tone filled with both helplessness and doting affection. Sumo bid farewell and left the Supreme Pontiff Palace, arriving at Qian Xunji's residence. At this moment, Qian Rengsu was running after butterflies in the garden, her delicately carved face overflowing with an innocent and joyful smile. Ling Yuan was watching from the side with a smile, her gaze gentle. It must be said that having been doted on by her parents since childhood, Qian Rengsu lived a truly carefree and very joyful life. Xiaomo, you're here. Ling Yuan saw Sumo first and greeted him with a smile. Teacher's wife. Sumo greeted Ling Yuan. Brother Sumo? Hearing the voice, Qian Rengsu immediately gave up chasing the butterflies, her two short legs running fast, the hem of her skirt flying as she dashed towards Sumo squatted down and caught the small figure rushing over. Little Zuer, brother has come to say goodbye to you this time. I am going to leave Spirit City for a while. He reached out and stroked Qian Rengsu's little head, her hair exceptionally soft. Ah, Qian Rengsu's little face immediately fell, her mouth pouted and mist rapidly welled up in her eye sockets. Brother Sumo, how long are you going to be away? She grabbed the corner of Sumo's clothes, her voice already carrying a sobbing tone. Ever since she became sensible, Sumo had told her many stories, every one of which had captivated her. Moreover, Sumo had made many fun little trinkets to amuse her and often brought her delicious treats. Therefore, apart from her parents, the person Qian Rengsu was most clingy with was Sumo. Hearing that Sumo was leaving, she was naturally very reluctant to let him go. Brother doesn't know how long it will take either, Sumo said softly. However, brother promises Zuer that after finishing my business I will definitely come back to see you as soon as possible. I'll bring you something delicious and fun then, okay? Alright. Qian Rengsu's voice was muffled, her little hand still gripping the corner of Sumo's clothes, refusing to let go. Then will you play with Zuer today and tell Zuer stories, okay? Qian Rengsu looked at Sumo expectantly, her eyes watery. Okay. Sumo smiled and nodded gently. Only then did Qian Rengsu break into a smile through her tears, hugging Sumo's neck and planting a kiss on his face. Brother Sumo, you are the best. Ling Yuan watched this scene from the side and couldn't help covering her mouth and giggling. If Qian Xunji saw this scene, he would probably be heartbroken. That afternoon, Sumo spent a long time playing with Qian Rengsu, until the sun set behind the western mountains, and the horizon was dyed with a layer of orange-red sunset clouds. Little Zuer, brother has to leave. Sumo leaned down and rubbed Qian Rengsu's little head. Qian Rengsu immediately stretched out her two little hands, tightly gripping the corner of Sumo's clothes, and said with reluctance, Brother Sumo, you must think of Zuer and come back quickly to keep Zuer company. Okay, brother will definitely think of cute little Zuer. Sumo pinched her chubby little face. Immediately after, under Qian Rengsu's reluctant gaze, Sumo turned and left the courtyard, inside the Holy Sun's palace. At this time, the three women, including Bibi Dong, had already finished their cultivation. Seeing Sumo's figure appear at the entrance of the main hall, the three women greeted him in unison. They had assumed that Sumo was still in the cultivation room attempting to overcome the final bottleneck, but they didn't expect him to have already come out of seclusion. Sumo, have you already had a breakthrough? Bibi Dong asked curiously. Sumo nodded. Yes, I have reached level 90. Ayin asked with reluctance. Then are you going to leave Spirit City? Sumo had previously told them that after reaching a breakthrough to level 90 he would leave for a period to obtain his 9th spirit ring and simultaneously complete his god's trial. Yes, Sumo nodded and replied softly. Then you must be careful on this trip. Yi Qingshuang's beautiful eyes were filled with worry. Rest assured, don't you know my strength by now? Sumo said with a smile. Afterward, the four of them ate dinner together, with the three women constantly picking food and feeding it to Sumo. After dinner, the four of them went upstairs together. Sumo was about to leave for a long time, and the three women, including Bibi Dong, felt immensely reluctant in their hearts. The long night stretched on, even though Sumo's physique far exceeded that of ordinary people. After a round of tossing and turning, he was inevitably somewhat exhausted. The next morning, under the reluctant gazes of the three women, Sumo left Spirit City. Spirit City. Blood-red longsword of spirit power condensed before Sumo tapped his toes lightly and landed on the body of the sword. With a whoosh, he flew into the sky, riding the sword in the air. Sumo's hair flew, his sleeves rustled in the wind. The mountains and rivers beneath his feet retreated rapidly and clouds drifted past him. This was Sumo's first time attempting to fly by riding a sword. Although the flying speed was far inferior to his external spirit bone, this feeling was truly quite good. Coming from Blue Star, he naturally had a Xiangxia dream in his past life, fantasizing about one day being able to step on a sword and soar through the sky, wandering freely between heaven and earth. Now that he had reached a breakthrough to level 90, he had finally fulfilled this dream. Chapter 114, Far North. The Far North is located north of the Heaven Dew Empire. It is covered in snow all year round, and the world is wrapped in a silver coat. The biting cold wind, carrying snow across the sky, howls and rages across the endless snow plains. At this moment, a streak of blood-colored light cuts through the vast snowy sky. It is none other than Sumo. From Spirit City to the far north, one must almost cross the entire Heaven Dew Empire. Even with Sumo's cultivation, it took him a long time to travel before finally reaching this land of extreme cold. As soon as he stepped into the territory of the far north, the surrounding temperature plummeted, and the deeper he went, the more bone-chilling the cold became. But Sumo did not stop at all, heading straight towards the core area. After more than half a day, he flew over the mixed area and officially entered the core area. Along the way, he encountered a few blind flying spirit beasts, but the strongest among them only had 40,000 years of cultivation, so they were naturally no match for Sumo. He did not even need to release his spirit to easily defeat those spirit beasts. The core area of the far north truly deserves its reputation as a forbidden zone for humans. Not only are the spirit beasts here powerful, but the cold is also terrifying to the extreme. If an ordinary person were here, their body would likely be frozen into an ice sculpture in an instant, losing all signs of life. Fortunately, Sumo's strength is formidable enough to withstand the bitter cold here. Sumo continued forward for a distance. Suddenly, a loud noise came from ahead. Sumo suddenly stopped and looked up. He saw that a few hundred meters away, a snowdrift the size of a small hill suddenly exploded, sending snow mist scattering in all directions. Immediately after, a giant ice python burst out of the snow. It was nearly 100 meters long, with scales like sapphires carved from ice crystals, refracting a blinding cold light. Sumo instantly recognized the species and age of the spirit beast. It was a cold nether ice python with cultivation approaching 90,000 years. Under the enhancement of the snowy environment of the far north, its strength was comparable to a human super Douluo. At this moment, the cold nether ice python's cold, vertical pupils were locked tightly onto Sumo, and chilling mist continuously overflowed from its mouth. This place was its territory, and Sumo had already stepped into its domain. This type of high-age spirit beast has an extremely strong sense of territory, and they would not be polite to any intruders. The cold nether ice python had no intention of testing him. Its giant mouth suddenly opened wide, and the cold air in the surrounding world seemed to be drawn by some force, frantically gathering and compressing into its mouth. Finally, it condensed into an ice-blue energy orb emitting a biting chill. The next second, an ice-blue breath as thick as a water bucket, carrying the momentum of destroying heaven and earth, blasted towards Sumo with astonishing speed. At that very instant, a blood-colored light suddenly shone from Sumo's left leg. It activated the 9-headed bloody crimson bat king left leg spirit bone skill, Batwing Blood Shield. A blood-colored energy shield instantly enveloped Sumo's entire body. Boom! The ice-blue breath slammed into the blood-colored shield, emitting a deafening explosion. In an instant, air waves surged and large amounts of surrounding snow were blown away. A moment later, the ice-blue breath dissipated, and the seemingly thin blood-colored shield around Sumo remained intact, without even a single crack. Seeing this, the cold nether ice python's vertical pupils suddenly contracted. Over 80,000 years of cultivation granted it intelligence no less than that of a human. It instantly understood that the human in front of it had strength far exceeding its imagination, but it did not retreat. Its giant mouth opened again, and an even faster, thicker, and more solid breath was sprayed out again, hitting the blood-colored shield with a boom. However, the blood-colored shield remained intact. At this time, Sumo condensed the Asura Demon Sword spirit in his hand, and 8 spirit rings appeared beneath his feet in sequence. 1 yellow, 2 purple, 1 black, 4 red. The moment the cold nether ice python saw those 400,000-year spirit rings, its entire body froze. It was stunned for a moment, then immediately twisted its massive body without hesitation, fleeing desperately into the distance. It knew very well that it was no match for this human, and the aura emitted by those 400,000-year spirit rings was simply too terrifying. Want to run? Sumo sneered. Too late. 4th spirit ability, Infinite Slaughter. The Asura Demon Sword in Sumo's hand glowed with an eerie red light. For the next half an hour, all his attacks would ignore defense. Immediately after, Sumo's 5th spirit ring lit up. 5th spirit ability, Asura Dragon Soul Slash. Roar. A dragon roar resonated through the heavens and earth. The next second, a massive dark red dragon soul broke out from the sword, carrying an aura that could destroy heaven and earth, and charged fiercely towards the cold nether ice python. The speed of the dragon soul was far greater than that of the cold nether ice python. The cold nether ice python had only escaped 100 meters when the dragon soul caught up from behind. Knowing it had no hope of escape, the cold nether ice python could only hastily turn around to defend itself. An ice-blue light surged around its body, and a thick layer of ice crystal armor instantly condensed on its surface. Boom! The dragon soul slammed into the cold nether ice python. The snow below exploded, and fragments of ice crystals and snow mist shot up into the sky. The ground shook violently, and an avalanche occurred on the distant snow mountain. When the snow mist gradually dissipated, the entire body of the cold nether ice python was seen embedded in a giant crater over 100 meters in diameter. Its ice crystal armor was completely shattered. Its body covered in wounds, ice-blue blood flowed all over the ground, and it had completely lost its breath. A moment later, a deep black spirit ring slowly condensed and formed above the corpse. Sumo just glanced at the spirit ring indifferently. An over 80,000-year spirit ring was an extremely rare 9th spirit ring for an ordinary titled Douluo. But for Sumo, it was not even worth a second glance. Moreover, he already had a target in mind for his ninth spirit ring. The million-year spirit beast in the deep sea demon whale king. Sumo flashed to the side of the cold nether ice python's corpse, pointed his right hand and unleashed a sharp blood-colored sword chi, precisely slicing open the python's body. Suddenly a glimmer of ice blue light appeared at its head. Sumo's eyes lit up. He did not expect a head spirit bone to drop. Along the way, none of the 10,000-year soul beasts he killed had dropped a spirit bone. Sumo reached out and grabbed it, and the spirit bone instantly fell into his palm. He examined it for a moment. The quality of this spirit bone was quite good, but Sumo would not absorb it himself. For him, the age was a bit low. He planned to save it for someone around him. Sumo put the spirit bone into his spirit tool, then sat cross-legged and began to meditate to recover the spirit power he had consumed. Although the battle just now was easy and did not consume much spirit power, this was already the core area full of dangers. The three kings of the far north, as well as the ice bear king Xiaobai, were all vicious beast level, and their strength was terrifying to the extreme. Therefore, for the sake of safety, Sumo had to maintain his peak state before continuing to venture deeper. Before long, Sumo's spirit power had recovered. His figure flashed, heading towards the depths of the vast snow plains. Chapter 115. The Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion. Half an hour later, Sumo had already arrived deep within the core zone of the far north. The surroundings were dead silent, with only the cold wind howling like knives. Suddenly, Sumo's figure came to a sudden halt. He sensed an extremely powerful aura rapidly approaching from the distance. In just 2 breaths of time, a stream of emerald green light tore through the sky, appearing in Sumo's field of vision. Everywhere the light passed, everything was frozen solid, leaving behind a long-lasting trail of ice crystals that gleamed with a piercing, cold light under the sky. Soon, the stream of light hovered in midair, facing Sumo from a distance. The light faded, revealing its form. It was an entirely emerald green spirit beast, shrouded in chilling air. Her body was about 1.5 meters tall. Her upper body resembled a human, with exquisite curves and a cold, elegant and delicate face that exuded an inviolable majesty, looking like a cold and aloof little lowly. Her lower body, however, was in the form of a scorpion. A long scorpion tail extended from her tailbone, gleaming with a cold, eerie light as it swayed slowly in the air. Sumo narrowed his eyes slightly, instantly recognizing her identity. Such a powerful Ice Jade Empress Scorpion could only be the Ice Emperor, one of the 3 great heavenly kings of the far north. The current Ice Emperor only had a cultivation of over 300,000 years, but possessing the ultimate ice, her strength was extremely terrifying, far beyond what her surface cultivation could measure. Looking down from above, the Ice Emperor stared at Sumo with cold emerald green eyes, her gaze filled with undisguised killing intent. Her thin lips parted slightly, and her voice was bone-chillingly cold. "Audacious human, how dare you trespass into this Emperor's territory?" As one of the 3 great heavenly kings, the Ice Jade Scorpion clan under the Ice Emperor's command occupied a vast territory. Where Sumo was currently standing was already within the boundaries of her territory. The chilling air around the Ice Emperor suddenly surged. As a spirit beast, she naturally harbored a deep-seated hostility toward humans. Over the long years, countless humans had stepped onto this ice field to hunt her clansmen. The actions of humans had long made the Ice Emperor utterly detest them. Now that Sumo had directly broken into her territory, she naturally wouldn't waste any words, unleashing a lethal move right from the start. Her hands and forearms instantly underwent a transformation, her originally jade-like skin becoming covered with a layer of diamond-like ice crystal particles. This was one of the Ice Emperor's skills, the Ice Emperor's claw. In close combat, it could tear and pierce targets and could also be used for defense. In the next instant, the Ice Emperor's figure turned into an emerald green afterimage, charging fiercely toward Sumo at a speed difficult for the naked eye to capture. Sumo's eyes sharpened as he instantly unleashed his Asura Demon Sword spirit. Immediately after, 8 spirit rings rose one by one from beneath his feet, emitting a suffocating sense of pressure. Sumo did not speak to explain the purpose of his trip. Because he knew that with the Ice Emperor's personality, even if he talked until he was blue in the face, she would never believe a single word. On this continent where the strong preyed on the weak, everything had to be decided by strength. He had to defeat her first and let her calm down before talking. The Ice Emperor, who was rushing toward Sumo, showed a look of shock in her cold eyes for the first time when she saw the 4 crimson spirit rings. Her forward momentum couldn't help but slow down slightly. Having lived for countless years, she had seen countless human spirit masters step into the far north, but she had never seen anyone whose spirit rings were at the 100,000-year level, starting from the 5th one. The Ice Emperor quickly suppressed the shock in her heart, her killing intent growing even stronger. Because the spirit power fluctuations radiating from Sumo were actually at level 90. In the Ice Emperor's view, a human with such cultivation entering the core zone of the far north could only have one purpose. That was to hunt for a 9th spirit ring. Moreover, with his spirit ring configuration, his target would be at least a 100,000-year level spirit beast. Judging by the current situation, 80% of it was for her. Thinking of this, the cold light in the Ice Emperor's emerald green eyes almost solidified. Her figure suddenly accelerated, her sharp scorpion claws tearing through the air and bringing a sharp whistling sound as she aimed straight for Sumo's vital points. Sumo flipped his wrist, and the Asura Demon Sword instantly met her attack. Boom! The Asura Demon Sword and the Ice Emperor's claw suddenly collided. Dark red and emerald green lights suddenly exploded in midair, and a visible shockwave of air rippled outward in all directions. This strike caused the Ice Emperor's expression to change drastically. The hardness of her Ice Emperor's claw was enough to go head-to-head with an attack system titled Douluo. But at this moment, the instant the Asura Demon Sword made contact with her Ice Emperor's claw, she felt an irresistible force surging over. That power was overbearing and fierce, carrying a strange, penetrating force that numbed her hands, and a faint crack even appeared on the surface of her scorpion claws. The Ice Emperor was utterly shocked, but she had lived for countless years after all and possessed extremely rich combat experience. Using the rebounding force, her body spun rapidly, and her ice crystal scorpion tail thrust toward Sumo like a venomous snake emerging from its cave. Sumo hurriedly sidestepped to dodge, and immediately after, the Asura Demon Sword slashed out horizontally. The Ice Emperor retracted her scorpion tail, her claws clashing hard with the sword blade once again. Her figure retreated several zhang before pouncing forward once more. Dark red sword light and emerald green light clashed and intersected in midair. In just a brief moment, the two had already fiercely fought for over 10 rounds. The Ice Emperor's offensive was ruthless and fierce, with her Ice Emperor's claw leading the frontal assault while her scorpion tail waited for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Yet Sumo still handled it with ease. Suddenly, a crisp cracking sound rang out. The Ice Emperor's two scorpion claws shattered with a bang under a heavy slash from the Asura Demon Sword. Countless ice crystal fragments splattered in all directions, refracting a sky full of cold light under the sky, scattering like broken diamonds. The Ice Emperor was horrified. Utilizing the momentum, she hurriedly retreated, instantly backing away over 100 meters. But just as she retreated, Sumo's right arm suddenly glowed with a layer of green light. Sumo did not hesitate to activate the Spirit Bone skill of the Sky Azure Bull Python, Azure Slowing Divine Claw. Making a grasping motion with his right hand, he suddenly reached out toward the Ice Emperor. A giant green dragon claw materialized in midair, its 5 fingers splayed wide. Each knuckle was as thick as a mountain, suddenly enveloping the Ice Emperor dozens of meters away. In an instant, with the green dragon claw as the center, the surrounding space seemed to be gripped by an invisible giant hand, and everything appeared to grind to a halt. The Ice Emperor clearly felt that her 6 senses and mobility had been slowed down several times over. But she was a vicious beast of over 300,000 years after all, and her strength was formidable. In just a breath of time, she forcibly broke free from the control. Emerald green light suddenly exploded on her body's surface, venting outward like a volcanic eruption and shattering that slowing force by brute strength. However, the very instant she broke free from the control, Sumo's next wave of attacks arrived one after another. His 4th spirit ring lit up. Immediately following that, his 5th spirit ring also lit up. 5th spirit ability, Asura Dragon Soul Slash. A dark red giant dragon burst forth from the sword. It let out a deafening dragon roar to the heavens, charging fiercely toward the Ice Emperor 100 meters away with an aura that could destroy everything. Chapter 116. Little Scorpion, this Empress's age is more than enough to be your ancestor. In the blink of an eye, the dark red giant dragon crashed violently into the Ice Empress's body and immediately exploded. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. An all-consuming crimson light spread frantically in all directions from the center of the explosion. A moment later, the crimson light gradually dissipated, revealing the Ice Empress's figure. At this moment, her body was covered in a thick layer of ice crystal armor. This was her strongest defensive skill, Ice Emperor's body protection. But now that once flawless ice crystal armor was covered in spiderweb-like cracks, at this moment the Ice Empress felt her blood boiling violently. A sweet taste rose in her throat, and a trace of emerald green blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. One must know that Sumo had previously used his 4th spirit ability and 5th spirit ability to slay an 80,000-year spirit beast in a single strike. Yet now the Ice Empress had taken this blow head-on, suffering only minor injuries. This showed just how terrifying her strength was. The Ice Empress raised her hand, wiping her fingertips across her lips to brush away the trace of emerald green blood. Her delicate body trembled slightly, not from pain, but from rage. She, the Ice Jade Empress Scorpion, one of the 3 great heavenly kings of the far north, a king among spirit beasts who had lived for countless eons, had actually been injured by a human who didn't even have a 9th spirit ring. To her, this was an absolute humiliation. The Ice Empress's emerald eyes were completely ignited with fury. Damned human. You have successfully enraged this Empress. Wrath of the Ice Emperor. A beam of emerald light carrying the power of ultimate ice blasted toward Sumo like a heavenly tribulation descending upon the world. Sumo's pupils contracted sharply, his expression more solemn than ever before. He did not dare to be the least bit careless. Without hesitation, he released his external soul bone, instant boost to all attributes. First spirit skill, Asura Blood Fiend. Second spirit skill, Asura Blood Armor. Sumo's defense, attack, speed, and strength doubled once again. Seventh spirit ability, Avatar of the Martial Soul. The seventh spirit ring suddenly burst with blood-red light. Behind Sumo, a massive illusory figure rose from the ground. The phantom was dark red all over, its appearance extremely similar to Sumo himself, but his aura was incredibly terrifying, like a god of death from hell. Immediately after, the Asura Demon Sword floated into the air. Amidst the swirling red light, the blade suddenly expanded several times, turning into a blood-red giant sword. The blood-red phantom reached out with a massive hand and gripped the hilt. At this moment, without using his domain or divine force, Sumo had reached his strongest state. Eighth spirit ability, Asura Judgment. The blood-red phantom pointed the giant sword at the incoming emerald beam of light and thrust it forward violently. Seeing this, a disdainful sneer appeared on the Ice Empress's lips. Wrath of the Ice Emperor was her strongest offensive skill, and it was further imbued with the power of ultimate ice. Not to mention a kid who didn't even have a ninth spirit ring. Even a peak human powerhouse would find it difficult to withstand this strike of hers with the amplification of this extremely cold region. At this moment, she could already envision the scene of Sumo being frozen into an ice sculpture. However, in the next moment, the smile on the Ice Empress's lips froze. The moment the blood-red giant sword collided with the emerald beam of light, there was no freezing as she had imagined, nor the shattering she had expected. Instead, the giant sword forcefully swallowed the emerald beam and stabbed straight toward her. How is this possible? The Ice Empress's pupils shrank as she cried out in disbelief. Even if it were 100,000-year spirit ability, her wrath of the Ice Emperor could never be neutralized so easily. But she had no time to think, because the blood-red giant sword was already right before her eyes. Before the sword even reached her, the fierce sword intent had already shredded the cold chi around her to pieces, and that overbearing extreme killing intent made her soul tremble in her haste. The Ice Empress could only release her Ice Emperor's claw once more, crossing them in front of her chest. At the same time, her spirit power surged frantically within her, conjuring a new layer of Ice Emperor's body protection to wrap herself airtight. She gritted her teeth, trying to block the blood-red giant sword that seemed capable of cutting through everything. Boom! The blood-red giant sword slammed violently into the Ice Emperor's claw. At the moment of collision, crack, a crisp shattering sound rang out. The defense-ignoring Asura Judgment directly shattered the Ice Emperor's claw that the Ice Empress was so proud of. Countless ice crystal shards splattered in all directions. Immediately after, the giant sword's momentum didn't decrease in the slightest as it stabbed heavily into the ice crystal armor. Crack! The ice crystal armor was shattered like paper, ice debris flying everywhere, yet the giant sword's momentum remained undiminished. Boom! The blood-red giant sword solidly struck the Ice Empress's actual body. With a muffled groan, the Ice Empress's blood surged violently, and she coughed up a mouthful of emerald green blood. Her body flew backward uncontrollably like a broken kite, drawing a long arc in the sky before crashing heavily into a towering snow mountain in the distance. Rumble! The snow mountain trembled violently, and the snow on the entire slope turned into a surging white torrent that poured down. The Ice Empress's figure was completely buried beneath the snow. Before long, the snow exploded. The Ice Empress's figure flew out from within. At this moment, her chest heaved violently. Emerald green blood slowly seeped from her wound, dripping onto the pristine white snow, presenting a shocking sight. She stared intently at Sumo, the initial contempt in her eyes completely gone, replaced by deep wariness and disbelief. This human strength far exceeded her understanding of human spirit masters. With her strength, combined with her home field advantage in the far north, she rarely met any match. Yet facing this young man before her, a level 90 spirit master who didn't even have a 9th spirit ring, she had actually lost that sword. What kind of spirit was it? Why was it able to suppress her ultimate ice? The Ice Empress bit her lower lip, her emerald eyes staring fixedly at Sumo without saying a word. At this moment, Sumo flipped his wrist, holding the sword behind his back, and spoke calmly. "Little Scorpion, stop. I didn't come here this time to hunt for a 9th spirit ring." "Little Scorpion?" The Ice Empress was stunned. Then she instantly flew into a rage. This human actually dared to call her a little scorpion. "Human kid," the Ice Empress said through gritted teeth. "This Empress's age is more than enough to be your ancestor. How dare you call me a little scorpion?" Of course, Sumo smiled slightly. "On the Douluo Continent, strength is respected. You can't beat me, so why can't I call you a little scorpion?" "You," the Ice Empress pointed at Sumo abruptly. She wanted to retort, but the words caught in her throat, because she indeed could not defeat this human. On this continent where the strong preyed on the weak, the word strength is respected, where an ironclad law wasn't her usual majesty and status also built upon these very words. But she just couldn't swallow this insult. The Ice Empress took a deep breath, forcing down the rage in her heart. Human, do you think this Empress would easily believe your nonsense? You are currently at level 90. If you didn't come to the far north to hunt for a spirit ring, what else could you possibly be here for? I came here to. Sumo's words cut off abruptly, because an aura even more terrifying than the Ice Empress's was rapidly approaching from afar, and at this moment, sensing that familiar aura, a look of joy suddenly appeared on the Ice Empress's face. Chapter 117, Snow Empress. A few breaths later, the chill between heaven and earth suddenly intensified. A beautiful figure quietly appeared, standing beside the Ice Empress. It was a woman with a tall figure, an exquisitely beautiful face, and skin as white as snow. Her temperament was as cold as ice, and her entire body exuded a chill that kept people thousands of miles away. Her long white hair cascaded down like a waterfall to her heels, fluttering gently in the cold wind. Every strand of hair held the luster of ice crystals, shimmering with a faint silver glow. Her ice-blue eyes were ethereal and transparent, as if they could see through everything in the world. A tight-fitting ice-blue long dress perfectly outlined her exquisite and shapely figure. Her tall stature, cold and elegant face, and aloof temperament gave her the perfect image of a cold, otherworldly mature woman. It formed a stark contrast with the Ice Empress's lowly-like appearance. One was cold, elegant, and noble, while the other was petite and proud. And Sumo recognized her identity at a glance, a humanoid spirit beast with powerful cultivation. She was undoubtedly the dominator of the far north, the head of the three great heavenly kings, the Ice Sky Snow Lady, the Snow Empress. The Snow Empress's current cultivation had already reached over 600,000 years, infinitely close to 700,000 years, and her strength was absolutely terrifying. On this vast and boundless ice field of the far north, countless spirit beasts ruled as kings, with the forces of various clans deeply intertwined. But the Snow Empress alone was recognized by all spirit beasts as the dominator of the far north. The Snow Empress's palace was not far from the Ice Empress's territory. With the Snow Empress's strength, she could naturally sense the battle that had broken out here. As the dominator of the far north, protecting the far north was her duty, not to mention that the one fighting was the Ice Empress. She and the Ice Empress had known each other for a long time and had spent countless years together. They were each other's most trusted partners, existences to whom they could entrust their backs. Therefore, when she sensed that the Ice Empress was in battle, she rushed over here with all her might without the slightest hesitation. When the Ice Empress saw the Snow Empress's arrival, her previous proud demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by a look of grievance. She looked just like a child who had been bullied outside and had finally met an elder who could back her up. You're finally here. I thought I would never see you again. She rushed to the Snow Empress's side in a few steps, reaching out to grab her hand, looking as aggrieved as could be. Then she suddenly raised her hand to point at Sumo, her tone filled with resentment. Hurry and help me take revenge. That human must have come to hunt for a spirit ring, maybe he's even targeting me. The Snow Empress nodded slightly and looked at Sumo, her face completely cold and aloof. What else could a human spirit master who had just stepped onto the threshold of a titled Douluo be doing by entering the core area of the far north other than hunting for spirit rings and spirit bones? She couldn't think of any other possibility. The Snow Empress parted her red lips, her voice as cold as ice. Human, you dare to trespass into the core area of the far north and even hurt Binger. Today you shall stay here forever. As soon as she finished speaking, cold air surged all around the Snow Empress. Emperor's cold sky, snow dance, shining sun. With the Snow Empress as the center, the surrounding temperature plummeted. This was one of the Snow Empress's three famous signature techniques. It was considered a domain-type spirit ability, possessing extremely strong control and area of effect damage capabilities. It could turn the surroundings into an extremely cold domain within a very short time, with dancing snowflakes forming a forbidden land, carrying freezing and slowing effects. Sumo's eyes narrowed. Without the slightest hesitation, he released his Asura domain, and a grayish-white tangible killing intent instantly spread out. In an instant, the temperature of the already bone-chilling far north seemed to plummet even further. In the blink of an eye, the two great domains engaged in a contest between heaven and earth. However, very quickly, the snow dance shining sun began to show signs of decline. The Asura domain advanced at a speed visible to the naked eye, its grayish-white killing intent like a tide, swallowing the deep blue ice and snow. Seeing this, the Snow Empress's pupils suddenly contracted. This human's domain was actually even more powerful than her emperor's cold sky. Suppressing the shock in her heart, she gave a cold shout, "Emperor's palm, great cold, no snow." The cold air around the Snow Empress suddenly condensed, gathering on her right palm. This move was extremely powerful, but it had a massive restriction. She had to strike the opponent with her actual palm to unleash its true power. The Snow Empress stepped through the air, her speed reaching the absolute limit, leaving an ice-blue afterimage in the air. Her right palm went straight for Sumo's chest. Before the palm even arrived, that bone-chilling coldness pierced toward Sumo's chest like a sharp spike. Circular killing array. Sumo shouted in a low voice. The tangible killing intent permeating the Asura Demon suddenly froze, then frantically gathered in front of Sumo, spinning rapidly. In an instant, a massive vortex of killing intent was formed. The vortex was like a miniature tornado, with every strand of killing intent turning into a sharp blade in the high-speed rotation, forming a death vortex capable of shredding everything in the world. Sumo pushed out with his large hand, sending the vortex of killing intent to envelop the rushing Snow Empress. But the Snow Empress was indeed worthy of being in existence close to 700,000 years old. She actually did not dodge at all, her emperor's palm meeting the vortex of killing intent head-on. There was not the slightest trace of fear in her eyes, only absolute confidence. Kai 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 kai! The moment the emperor's palm cut into the grayish-white vortex, it frictioned frantically against the sharp killing intent. But they only remained in a deadlock for a brief moment. The white vortex, which possessed extremely powerful cutting capabilities, was actually shattered by a single palm strike from the Snow Empress. The Snow Empress's figure broke through it, the power of her emperor's palm not diminishing in the slightest as she continued to strike toward Sumo. Seeing this, Sumo was not surprised at all. With the Snow Empress's strength coupled with the environmental boost of the far north, her power was basically invincible on the continent. Sumo did not hesitate and his sixth spirit ring suddenly lit up. Sixth spirit ability, Undying Blood Body. A strange blood-red light surfaced around Sumo's body, and his physical form began to grow illusionary. Bang! The Emperor's palm struck Sumo's chest squarely, but the very instant it hit, Sumo's body suddenly disintegrated, transforming into countless blood-red energy bats that scattered and flew away with a rustle. Those bats were crimson like blood, their wings as thin as cicada wings, emitting a faint buzzing as they flapped. They eventually reassembled not far away. With a flash of blood-red light, Sumo's figure condensed once more. But right at this moment, the Snow Empress's offensive followed closely behind. She withdrew her right palm and cold air surged frantically. Emperor's sword, ice extremity peerless, an ice-blue long sword condensed into shape in midair. The blade seemed to be condensed from 10,000-year ice crystals. The long sword moved along with the Snow Empress's delicate hand, its tip pointing straight at Sumo as it slashed down violently. Eighth spirit ability, Asura Judgment. The blood-red phantom behind Sumo held a giant sword and swung it to meet the attack. Boom! The two giant swords collided violently in midair. Where the ice-blue Emperor sword clashed with the dark-red Asura Demon Sword, a visible wave of air swept out in all directions. Chapter 118, Pride of the Ice and Snow Empresses. But after only a moment, a crisp cracking sound was heard. On the surface of the Emperor's sword, spiderweb-like cracks began to appear, rapidly spreading from the edge of the blade to the center. And the cracks grew more and more numerous. Finally, the Emperor's sword shattered with a bang, turning into a sky full of ice crystals. After shattering the Emperor's sword, although the momentum of the giant Asura sword slowed down slightly, it still slashed toward the Snow Empress. The Snow Empress's expression changed slightly, and the cold air around her surged once more as she condensed a deep blue ice crystal shield in front of her. The blood-colored giant sword slammed heavily onto the ice crystal shield. Having been depleted by the Emperor's sword, the remaining power of the giant sword was no longer enough to pierce through this shield. Ultimately, the blood-colored giant sword exhausted its strength, leaving cracks on the shield before dispersing into specks of red light. "Let me help you." The Ice Empress behind her hurriedly stepped forward. In her mind, the Snow Empress was an invincible existence. But now the Snow Empress was actually unable to take down Sumo immediately, and had even fallen into a disadvantage. This caused stormy waves to rise in the Ice Empress's heart. Thus, she had no choice but to take action. The two women looked at each other. Years of tacit understanding meant they needed no words. With just a single glance, they already understood each other's intentions. The Snow Empress and the Ice Empress simultaneously channeled their spirit power, and white and jade-green light surged from their bodies. The two beams of light intertwined in midair, fusing with each other until they gradually became indistinguishable. Pride of the Ice and Snow Empresses. The temperature of the entire world plummeted to the absolute limit at this moment. In the next instant, a massive ice storm tempest instantly took shape. The ice storm tempest rolled toward Sumo with astonishing speed. Wherever it passed, everything was crushed and devoured. Sumo knew that this strike was different from before. This was the strongest joint attack of the two heavenly kings of the far north, and he did not dare to be careless in the slightest. He took a deep breath, and the Asura divine force within his body began to surge. Asura domain, manifestation of the Asura god. The moment the words fell, the blood-colored illusory figure behind him expanded violently. Between its brows was a coldness and arrogance that looked down upon all living things, as if a true divinity had descended upon the mortal realm. The illusory figure's massive hand clenched in the void realm, a blood-colored giant sword, longer and wider, condensed into existence, radiating a suffocating sense of oppression. This strike was completely different from Sumo's previous spirit ability attacks. The previous Asura Judgment, though immensely powerful, ultimately remained at the level of a spirit ability, driven by the power of spirit power. But this strike had fused with the Asura divine force within Sumo's body, a supreme power that transcended spirit power. Its power was far beyond what previous spirit abilities could compare to. Soon, the blood-colored giant sword slashed down with a resounding boom. There were no fancy techniques, only the purest, most overbearing power. The giant sword swept from top to bottom, advancing with indomitable force. The moment this sword slashed down, heaven and earth lost their color. In the blink of an eye, the ice storm tempest and the blood-colored giant sword collided head-on. There was no equal match, nor was there any stalemate. Under the blood-colored giant sword, the massive ice storm tempest was actually split right down the middle, ultimately dispersing. Yet the momentum of the blood-colored giant sword remained undiminished as it continued to slash down toward the ice and snow empresses. Snow Empress's pupils contracted sharply. The aura radiated by this strike caused even her to feel a pang of dread. The Snow Empress knew that the current Ice Empress could absolutely not block this strike. With a flash of her figure, she blocked the path in front of the Ice Empress. Zuer quickly dodged. Don't worry about me. The Ice Empress also felt the terror of this strike, her beautiful jade-green eyes filled with shock and worry. Quickly defend with all your might. The Snow Empress did not retreat in the slightest. She poured out all of her spirit power, condensing an ice crystal barrier in front of herself. The Ice Empress also hurriedly released the Ice Emperor's body protection, condensing a layer of ice crystal armor on the surface of her body. Crack! The blood-colored giant sword fell with a crash, and their defenses shattered like paper as ice crystal fragments splattered in all directions like a rainstorm. Soon the residual force of the blood-colored giant sword landed on the ice and snow empresses. Boom! Ice and snow scattered all over the sky. The ground trembled violently and the ancient ice was directly slashed into a deep trench by this strike, resembling an ice crystal canyon. The ice and snow gradually dispersed, revealing the figures of the ice and snow empresses. The snow empress's aura was somewhat unstable, her chest heaving violently. Had it not been for her profound strength, the far north being her home turf and Sumo currently being only level 90 and not using much divine force, this single strike would have been enough to severely wound her. The Ice Empress, who was protected behind the Snow Empress, was also hit by the aftershock. Already injured to begin with, her wounds worsened by a few degrees, yet she still held on, gritting her teeth tightly and staring fiercely at Sumo. Binger, are you all right? The Snow Empress channeled a portion of her spirit power into her body to help stabilize her injuries. Her face was filled with gravity. Sumo's strength far exceeded her imagination. I won't die, the Ice Empress said, shaking her head slightly. At this moment Sumo stood with his sword behind his back, his robes fluttering loudly in the cold wind. He looked down upon the ice and snow empresses from above, his expression calm, devoid of a victor's arrogance or intent to kill as he spoke softly. Can we have a proper talk now? Hearing this, the Ice Empress felt a sudden wave of surprise in her heart. She stared blankly at Sumo. Could it be that he really hadn't come to hunt for a spirit ring, but had another purpose instead? What do you want to do? The Snow Empress stared warily at Sumo. Sumo smiled slightly. I bear no ill intent on this trip. I came specifically to find you, Snow Empress. My action just now was only to calm you both down so you would listen to me. To find me? The Snow Empress looked at him in surprise, her brow furrowing slightly. What matter? She asked, the hostility in her tone having lessened slightly though her wariness remained. Sumo looked directly into the Snow Empress's eyes. A soul core should have already condensed within your body, correct? I have come this time precisely for this object. The Snow Empress's pupils suddenly contracted slightly, the method of condensing a soul core, so this human actually harbored such intentions. A soul core had indeed long since formed within her body, but how did this opponent know? The Snow Empress remained silent for a moment, then raised her eyes to look directly into Sumo's, finding not a hint of killing intent in them. In the clash just now, he clearly held the absolute upper hand, yet he had actively held back. This was enough to prove that, from beginning to end, his only goal was the method of condensing a soul core. She glanced at the Ice Empress beside her, pondering silently. If they continued to fight, she herself would be fine for the time being, but the Ice Empress would certainly find it difficult to hold out. After weighing her options for a moment, the Snow Empress spoke slowly. Very well, I can assist you. The Snow Empress ultimately chose to compromise. Her voice was still cold, but her tone was no longer as hostile as before. Sumo's smile deepened slightly. Well, this will be the most correct choice you have ever made. Now let us change locations and talk in detail. The Snow Empress nodded slightly and said softly, come with me. Seeing that the Snow Empress had agreed, the Ice Empress opened her mouth as if to say something but ultimately remained silent. She merely glanced at Sumo, then followed the Snow Empress toward the depths. With a movement of his body, Sumo also followed. Chapter 119, the Tsundir Ice Empress. Deep within the core area of the far north, a majestic ice crystal palace rose from the ground, standing quietly upon the vast snowy plains, gleaming with a cold, eerie luster. This was the Snow Empress's palace. Led by the Ice and Snow Empresses, Sumo stepped into the grand hall. Looking up, the ice crystal hall's dome was high and vast, seemingly formed by nature, with everything around forged from freezing ice. At the end of the hall, atop tiers of ice steps, an ice crystal throne stood quietly. Aside from this, there were no other furnishings in the hall. Sumo swept his gaze around, then withdrew his eyes and looked at the Ice Empress, speaking calmly, "Little Scorpion, come over here for a moment." Coldness around the Ice Empress instantly surged, and she subconsciously took half a step back, asking coldly, "What do you want to do?" Her eyes were filled with vigilance and wariness. She didn't have a single shred of goodwill toward Sumo, who had injured her. Instead, her heart was filled with pent-up frustration. Having lived for countless years, she had never suffered such a huge loss. If not for her lack of strength, she really wanted to freeze Sumo into an ice sculpture and shatter him into pieces. What scared Sumo smiled playfully. "Weren't you quite the fighter outside just now? You." The Ice Empress trembled with anger. "Who's afraid of you? I just don't want to get close to someone like you." Oh, Sumo raised an eyebrow. "What kind of person am I?" "HMPH, a devious, cunning, despicable and shameless person, of course," the Ice Empress said through gritted teeth. "All right." Sumo shook his head helplessly. "If I really wanted to do something to you, do you think you'd still be standing here talking to me?" The Ice Empress wanted to retort, but she swallowed her words back down because what Sumo said was the truth. With the strength he had displayed, if he truly harbored ill intent, she wouldn't have been able to walk into this palace alive. But she just couldn't stomach this grievance. "What on earth do you want?" the Ice Empress asked coldly, the hostility in her tone not decreasing in the slightest. Sumo said indifferently, "Haven't you noticed that there is an extra strange force in your body?" What he was referring to was precisely the Asura power left in the Ice Empress's body during their previous clash. That force was overbearing and fierce, capable of invading the meridians through the wound, continuously eroding the foundation like maggots on a bone. Although with the Ice Empress's cultivation she could clear it herself given some time, but if not treated in time, it could easily leave hidden injuries or even damage her origin, causing irreversible harm. Sumo had come here seeking the Snow Empress's help in the first place, and since the Ice Empress was the Snow Empress's close friend, he naturally had no intention of harming her. "Of course I felt it, but isn't it all thanks to you?" the Ice Empress said coldly. From the moment she was injured, a strange force had slipped into her body through the wound, causing her spirit power to circulate sluggishly. She had tried to obliterate it, but it was completely useless. "That's why I asked you to come over to clear that energy for you." Ice Empress didn't reply to Sumo immediately. Instead, she turned her head to look at the Snow Empress, her eyes carrying a questioning look. The Snow Empress nodded slightly. "Go ahead." Along the way the Snow Empress had been secretly observing Sumo. She noticed that Sumo had remained calm and composed from beginning to end. Furthermore, with the strength he had displayed, if he truly wanted to harm the Ice Empress, he wouldn't need to go through so much trouble. Ice Empress, seeing this, hesitated before slowly walking up to Sumo. She looked up at him, though a stubborn, unyielding look still lingered in the depths of her eyes. "Raise your hands," Sumo said. The Ice Empress's injuries were mainly on her arms. The Ice Empress hesitated for a moment but still extended her hands. Sumo slowly raised his right hand as his spirit power quietly circulated around his body. By now, his control over the Asura power was already highly proficient, able to be summoned and withdrawn at will. A thread of dark red energy, like a slender wisp of silk, slowly drifted out from the Ice Empress's wound, swirling and writhing in the air. Then it sank into his palm, returning to his own body a moment later. "Does it feel?" Sumo withdrew his hand, his tone indifferent. Without the erosion of the Asura power, given the Ice Empress's deep foundation, it wouldn't take long for her to fully recover. The Ice Empress hesitated for a moment but still spoke the truth. "Much better." "That's good then." Ice Empress opened her mouth, seemingly wanting to say something, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. This human was completely different from her impression of humans. In the Ice Empress's eyes, humans had always been greedy and cunning. Yet the person before her was clearly far stronger than her. Yet not only had he shown mercy before, but now he was even taking the initiative to resolve her hidden trouble. Sumo glanced at her and smiled. "If you want to say something, just say it." Ice Empress bit her lip as if making a major decision. Only after a long while did she squeeze out a sentence, "Thank you." After saying that, she turned her face away. Having lived for so many years, she had never said such words to a human before. She felt extremely awkward, wishing she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Wait. The Ice Empress suddenly felt that something was very wrong. That was caused by him in the first place, so why did she just thank him at this moment? Sumo chuckled and his gaze shifted to the Snow Empress. "Can we talk about business now?" The Snow Empress nodded gently. "Follow me." With that, she turned and walked toward the depths of the palace. Sumo followed closely behind. The Ice Empress called out hastily, her brow furrowed with worry. The Snow Empress was the person she cared about most, yet now she was about to be alone with a powerful human man. She couldn't help but feel a trace of anxiety in her heart. The Snow Empress paused her steps and turned her head back. "It's fine, I trust him." The Ice Empress opened her mouth, but ultimately swallowed her words back down. The Snow Empress nodded slightly to Sumo and Sumo followed. The Ice Empress could only stand quietly in the Grand Hall, watching the two figures drift further and further away until they disappeared into the depths. After a long while she let out a soft snort and began circulating her spirit power on the spot to recover from her injuries. No matter what, she had to recover her condition as quickly as possible. If that man dared to show even a hint of ill intent toward the Snow Empress, she would fight him to the death even if it cost her life, although, that human didn't seem to be that bad. But since it concerned the Snow Empress she had to remain vigilant, inside the cultivation room at the back of the palace. Although this place was not as grand and spacious as the main hall, it appeared even more serene and quiet. Inside stood a massive ice bed carved from a single piece of 10,000-year mysterious ice. It was square and neat, its surface as smooth as a mirror with cold mist lingering around it. This was where the Snow Empress usually cultivated or rested. The Snow Empress came to a stop in front of the ice bed and turned back to look at Sumo. Binger's personality is just like that, don't mind what she said earlier. Sumo shook his head slightly. I didn't take it to heart. Of course, he knew the Ice Empress's personality. She was just a stubborn tsundere, cold on the outside but warm on the inside, sharp-tongued but soft-hearted. Hearing this, the Snow Empress breathed a sigh of relief. After a brief contemplation, she changed the subject. May I ask you a question? Feel free to ask. The power you used earlier shouldn't be spirit power, right? The Snow Empress looked directly into Sumo's eyes, an inquisitive look flashing in her own. Sumo nodded slightly. There's no harm in telling you, I am actually the successor of a god. The power I used earlier is the divine force within my body. The Snow Empress's pupils shrank abruptly, and she stared at him blankly, her mind going completely empty. This human before her was actually the successor of a god. Didn't this mean that he would one day be able to become a true god? Suddenly, the Snow Empress's expression dimmed slightly. Although the lifespan of humans was not as long as that of spirit beasts, they had the opportunity to step into that legendary realm. On the other hand, what about the Spirit Beast clan? Chapter 120. Condensing spirit core. Although they have long lifespans, they are trapped in this world. Just like her, day after day, year after year, cultivating bitterly in the far north. Having finally reached this point, she is about to face the 700,000-year Great Tribulation. And she has a premonition that with her current accumulation and foundation, she likely won't survive this tribulation. Countless days and nights of bitter cultivation, a body of majestic cultivation, only to turn to dust under the heavenly tribulation. Of course, she could discard her cultivation, undergo reincarnation, and start from zero as a human, but she wouldn't take that step unless it was a last resort. What's even more desperate is that even if she luckily survives the heavenly tribulation or even cultivates to 1,000,000 years, she could never become a divine beast. This is the limitation of the rules of heaven and earth, a destiny carved into the bloodline of spirit beasts. What is wrong with you? Sumo noticed the change in her mood. Snow Empress snapped back to reality and smiled forcedly. Nothing, just feeling a bit emotional. Emotional about what? Snow Empress sighed lightly. Your human lifespans are short, but you have infinite possibilities, just like you, still young yet about to become a high and mighty god, while we spirit beasts, after cultivating for hundreds of thousands of years, end up with nothing. Sumo looked at her, silent for a moment, and asked, You should be nearing your undergoing tribulation. Empress nodded lightly. Sumo asked again, Are you worried you won't survive the lightning tribulation? Snow Empress frankly admitted, the 700,000-year Great Tribulation is far more powerful than the 600,000-year one. With my current accumulation, I only have at most a 10% chance. I can help you. Snow Empress was stunned. What did you say? My god's trial progress is already past the halfway mark. Once I become a god, a mere spirit beast lightning tribulation won't be worth mentioning. This can also be considered repayment for you telling me the method to condense a spirit core. Really? Snow Empress opened her eyes wide in disbelief. Lightning tribulation is the power of divine punishment. How could human strength resist it easily? If others intervene, it will only attract a more violent lightning tribulation. Since ancient times, how many powerful spirit beasts have fallen under the lightning tribulation, turning into scorched earth, eventually dissipating between heaven and earth, but the strength of the person in front of her is truly unfathomable. And he said it himself, he is the successor of a god, a future god. With a god taking action, what is a mere 700,000-year spirit beast lightning tribulation? I don't like to joke, Sumo said seriously. Snow Empress took a deep breath, trying to calm her heart. She looked into Sumo's eyes, trying to find a trace of falsehood or perfunctoriness, but all she saw was seriousness and sincerity. This human is serious. He is truly willing to help her. Thank you. Snow Empress rarely showed a faint smile, and her heart, which had been silent for hundreds of thousands of years, quietly rippled. Sumo watched the smile on Snow Empress's face, his heart stirred slightly. The smiling Snow Empress indeed had a unique beauty, but he quickly composed himself, suppressing distracting thoughts. Right now, condensing the spirit core is the top priority. No need to thank me, we're just getting what we need. Let's start quickly. Snow Empress nodded slightly and said slowly, condensing a spirit core cannot be completed in a moment. It took me a long time to successfully condense one back then. I'll first tell you the process of how I condensed my spirit core back then as well as the difficulties I encountered. Listen carefully and ask me if you don't understand anything. Okay, immediately Snow Empress spoke slowly. She held nothing back. Sumo is willing to help her through the tribulation. That is a great favor. All she can repay is to teach him everything. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. By the time Snow Empress finished speaking, more than an hour had passed. Said everything I can, the rest is up to you. Snow Empress sighed with relief. Condensing a spirit core cannot be rushed. Take your time. If you have any questions, you can ask me anytime. I'll be outside. Thank you. Snow Empress didn't say more, just nodded slightly and turned away. Sumo began to try to condense the spirit core. Zuer, side the hall. Ice Empress sensed Snow Empress's aura approaching, immediately finished healing and flashed over to meet her. He didn't do anything to you, did he? Ice Empress's gaze swept up and down, carefully examining Snow Empress and only breathed a sigh of relief after confirming she was unharmed. No, what are you thinking? Snow Empress shook her head helplessly. I was just worried about you. Ice Empress pouted. Really fine. By the way, I have good news to tell you. What good news? Ice Empress was stunned. My 700,000-year great tribulation has hope of being survived. Are you telling the truth? Ice Empress's eyes lit up instantly. Spirit beast heavenly tribulation. Every 100,000 years the power increases geometrically. With Snow Empress's current accumulation, the hope of surviving the 700,000-year great tribulation is extremely slim. And this matter has been like a boulder pressing on Ice Empress's heart, but she couldn't do anything. She could only watch that day approach. When have I ever lied to you? Snow Empress smiled faintly. What exactly is going on? Tell me quickly. Ice Empress asked eagerly. It's that human. He is actually a successor of a god, an existence about to become a god. He promised to take action and help me when I undergo the tribulation. A god, Ice Empress muttered to herself, the shock in her eyes growing deeper. She recalled the power on Sumo that made her soul tremble, the pressure far beyond the category of spirit power. At the time she only felt that the power was extremely strong, but she never thought about gods. After all, gods were too distant for her. Now that she thought about it, that kind of power indeed shouldn't exist in the mortal world. No wonder he's so strong. Empress muttered, the sense of frustration in her heart disappearing completely. It was quite reasonable for a god's successor to be able to defeat her. Then is his promise reliable? Ice Empress asked again. What if he just said it casually? He is not that kind of person. Snow Empress shook her head. I can feel that he meant it. How long have you known him to trust him so much? Ice Empress felt sour inside. Some people you might know for a lifetime and not necessarily trust, but with some people one meeting is enough. Snow Empress said softly. From the moment he helped you I could see it. Empress pouted, wanting to retort but couldn't say anything. All right, Binger, Snow Empress said softly. Don't think too much, now you can rest assured. Ice Empress nodded heavily. The boulder that had been hanging in her heart for a long time finally fell at this moment. Although the heavenly tribulation hasn't truly arrived and nothing is set in stone, at least there is hope. Having hope is better than anything. At the same time, the last bit of hostility towards Sumo in her heart dissipated. After all, that bit of hostility was just resentment born after she was defeated, not some deep-seated hatred. Moreover, Sumo had taken the initiative to remove the hidden dangers for her afterward. But what truly made her completely let go of her prejudices was Snow Empress's words just now. Sumo is the key to Snow Empress's undergoing tribulation. For the sake of Snow Empress, she cannot offend him no matter what. Not only can she not offend him, but she even needs to be more polite and respectful to him. After all, Snow Empress's future is tied to him.